Better Preach, Episode 91. Start your talks like this. Welcome to Better Preach, a podcast for Catholic leaders on developing and delivering great Catholic talks. I'm your host, Ryan O'Hara, a Catholic speaker specializing in parish missions and parish retreats, and I'm so excited to join you on your journey of communicating the true, the good, and the beautiful. Okay, so the most precious real estate of any talk, I would say, is that first 90 seconds or so, where the audience is trying to figure out, are they going to stay tuned or are they going to tune out? Today, I want to share with you what not to do and hopefully what to do in those first 90 seconds to make sure that you make the most of that precious real estate. Here we are continuing on with season 4 of Better Preach. Really excited about what's to come. Some great interviews, some great solo episodes coming up, some book reviews that we're going to be doing too this season. Really excited to continue plowing ahead. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you on your thoughts on Better Preach, ryanohara.org/Better Preach. There's a little contact form there, but you could also leave a rating or written review on Spotify or Apple Podcast. That makes my day. Just to hear from you. That's what I love. I love to hear from you guys. So reach out and share with me your thoughts on Better Preach. And as always, I would love to connect on Instagram at Better Preach, all one word there, right on the IG. Let's get into it. So I've been giving talks to Catholic audiences for 26, 27, 28 years, something like that. And I would say for the first 20 years or so, I started my talks just like it seemed like everybody did. I did one of a few things. I would reintroduce myself. Like the person who just introduced me said, my name is Ryan O'Hara, blah, 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 blah. And I might say a few things, literally repeating what maybe they had just said in my introduction. Or I would say something like, hey, how's everybody doing? How was lunch? Some kind of random question like that. And if you start off by saying, hey, how's everybody doing? Or how's lunch? You usually get kind of a modest response. But nobody on stage or, who's been given a mic likes a modest response. So they try again. And you say something like, I said, how's everybody doing? And then usually then they give you a little more of a wholehearted response as a group. Or you might say something, I think this is most typical. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you to so-and-so for having me. I'm really excited to be doing this talk. These are the wrong ways to start a talk. In fact, I want to share with you today 3 things that you can do, and I would dare say even should do to begin every one of your talks. But first, I want to address why is it that we do these other things? We reintroduce ourselves. We ask how everybody's doing, or, we mention that we're so honored to be there. I think there are 3 reasons, and probably usually a combination of these 3 reasons. 1, we're nervous. We're trying to get the nerves out. Number 2, and usually it's in combination with the first one, we're nervous and we don't have a plan for how exactly we're going to start, or we don't love how we're going to start. And so we're kind of delaying, trying to get kind of some energy underneath us. So there's nerves at play. We're not quite sure what we're going to say, or we're not super confident about what we're going to say. Or the third reason, and I think this is mostly why we do it, we think that's how you start talks. We think because that's generally what you see people doing, honoring the folks who've brought them up there, which I'll address that in a minute. We ask a question, again, as a way to kind of get our nerves out, or we feel like we have to reintroduce ourselves. When we do this, all the while, we are wasting the most precious real estate of any talk. In the first 60 to 90 seconds, your audience, who may or may not know you, who may or may not be excited to hear you speak, hopefully they're interested in your topic, that's why they're there. In those first 60 or 90 seconds, your audience is making some really crucial decisions. Are you going to bring information that can be really helpful to them? Are you going to get their attention? That's what they're deciding in those first 60 or 90 seconds. It might even be less than that. It could be in the first 30 seconds. They're going to size you up and figure out, is this someone that I want to spend the next 20, 30 minutes or more listening to? And these are the snap judgments that everyone is making as soon as we begin speaking. Nowadays, with apps like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, with the Reels and TikToks that people watch, they are making decisions in a millisecond whether or not they're going to continue watching that video. The entire shape of social media has been turned around on this very idea, that the algorithm believes that it can find and know exactly what it is you're going to watch because they get a sense of what you like and what you don't like. We do it in a heartbeat. We make those decisions on our phones every day. Why would it be any different, in a live situation? And so that's why I think in the first 90 seconds, we have some really important ground to take in our talk. What you want to do is to put your focus on providing value immediately to the audience. When you honor someone or you honor the conference, that's putting value on the conference team or the planning team. And when you do anything else, you're really drawing more attention to yourself. But in these ways that I want to suggest, 3 things that you can do, you're starting to put the focus on providing value for the audience, and you're doing so immediately. And so right away, by coming out with one of these 3 things, and here's what I would suggest, and I'll go into each of these in a little more detail in a second. But I would suggest starting right away with an interesting story, a bold statement, or a compelling statistic. One of those 3 things. Before you say anything else, that you start your talk with one of those 3 things. You dive right in with confidence and joy and energy. You dive right in. And that's the first thing, the very first thing that you want to do. Now, I will note this. It is important, perhaps, to share a bit more about who you are. It is important to honor the conference team and the setting and to share your gratitude. All of those things I think you can do appropriately if it's necessary or needed and you want to do that. I think you can do that after the introduction, after this first opening 90 seconds or so. You see it all the time in YouTube videos, where in YouTube videos, people jump right in to the problem that they're hoping they're going to solve in the video. And right after the first 30 seconds or so, you hear them introduce themselves. I'm Ryan O'Hara. I'm a Catholic speaker, and I live in West St. Paul. We have 4 teenage and young adult sons, and I'm so excited to help your children launch into adulthood. This conference is an amazing way to help us move our kids in the right direction. So just in 30 seconds, hopefully you've gotten their attention in the first 90 seconds, and then you can do some of those things that can help connect you more personally to the audience. But then you get right back into the content. So let me share with you a little bit about where this comes from for me. Like I said, for the first 20 years or so of giving talks, I would start with those niceties, thanking the host, telling people how excited I was to be there, asking random questions that didn't get answered very well, and then having to ask them again. or maybe reintroducing myself. For most of the time, for the first 20 years, that's what I did. Jon Acuff is a Christian author and corporate keynote speaker, one of my favorites, one of the best communicators out there. He shared either in a video or in a blog, I think it was a blog post, about how he has taken hold of the first 90 seconds of every one of his talks, that he has sort of swapped out the traditional things that you see people doing and going right away, right into the talk from second one. And when I heard him describe that, I thought, oh my gosh, I have been letting go of this most precious real estate. And I wonder if there's something, I can do about it. And I was so excited to start opening my talks differently. And honestly, in the last 8 or 10 years or so, I have not looked back. And I think when you do this, and let me share a little bit about what each of these things are. These aren't the only things that you could start your talk with. I just want to give you some examples. You could start with an interesting story. It could be one of your own. It could be the story from a friend, or it could be the life of a saint, or it could be another great story that you've heard or read about before that you'd like to share. People love stories. And the other thing about stories is you don't always have to tell them chronologically. Sometimes you can dive right in, and maybe you should dive right in to really grab people's attention. Let me tell you about the scariest moment of my life. Now, hopefully what you're going to share is, makes good on that promise, but you can see right away by jumping right into the middle of the story, you're grabbing people's attention. If those were the first words that you heard when I was going to give a talk, you would sit up in your seat, I think, and you would want to pay attention. You would want to know, what was the scariest moment of my life? Now, again, that's just an example. Could you start with an interesting story and start in a way that really grabs people's attention? So, interesting story. That's the first one. The second one is a bold statement or a quote. And again, the saints are perfect for this. The saints have so many powerful quotes about the spiritual life, especially as we speak to Catholic audiences. Find a powerful quote from a saint, share it, and then share immediately how that applies to what they're going to get out of the talk. I'll give you an example. This weekend, coming up a week from now, I'm going to be giving a talk to a group of about 300 high school students from around the country on developing the habits of a spiritual life to give our attention to what matters most. And I'm going to open the talk in this way. I'm going to say, it has never been harder in the history of teenagers than it is right now for you, meaning teenagers, to give attention consistently to what matters most in life. Now, I'm going to open the talk in that way. Hopefully that works out. We'll see how it goes. I'm not exactly sure. It's the first time I've given this talk, and so I've been wrestling with kind of how to open it. But I think it's true. I think it's never been harder in the history of teenagers for teenagers to give attention consistently to what matters most in life. It's never been harder than it is today in 2025. That's an example of a bold statement that I'm going to open a talk that I'm going to be giving in the next week or so. There's also this great line, and unfortunately I'm doing it from memory right now, but A.W. Tozer, a Christian theologian, has this great line where he says, the most important thing about us is what comes to mind when we think about God. Now, that's a bold statement and may need to be qualified perhaps, but it's an incredible way to open a talk when you're discussing about what God is like, the nature of who God is. And so I've done a handful of talks on the character of God, and I've used that as a way to open the talk in that way. So that's the second thing, a bold statement or quote. Finally, some compelling statistic. For a number of years, and I actually think that this tide is changing, but there was a statistic that was put out by some religious researchers that said that for every one person who becomes Catholic, 6 Catholics leave the church. Bishop Barron some years ago had quoted this. This would be an incredible quote to share at the beginning of a talk, around something around the evangelizing mission of the church. This would be a great way to kind of set the stage, the reality of where things are. Hopefully a quote like this would get people's attention. Now, as I said, after you share one of these 3 things, an interesting story, a bold statement, or a compelling statistic, it's at that point that you can kind of embed some of the niceties that you might have wanted to embed, at the beginning of the talk. But now you've gotten people's attention and you've been able to maybe share a little bit of, those things that you feel like are important to share personally, both about yourself or your gratitude for being there. But what you've done is you've gained people's attention. You've built some rapport and you've told them, I've got a plan. We're going somewhere, folks. And it invites them to continue following along. Those first 60 to 90 seconds, that's what people are trying to figure out. Is this person worth listening to? And I want you to make the most of those first 60 or 90 seconds. And so here's how I do it. I have notes with me, and I don't often have them at the podium before I begin. So I bring my notes up. I kind of set my notes on a podium. I start my timer, and all the while I'm not saying anything. I'm sort of getting set and ready to go. I usually look at the group. I smile at them. I take a deep breath. And all of this happens very quickly. And then I begin as I'm planning, to begin, however it is I'm beginning. And so I take time to get set, zip my lip, smile, take a deep breath, and then I let it rip. This has been a practice that I've had as I begin all of my talks, again, wherever they may be. And so I hope this has been helpful. Perhaps it's a bit challenging. Perhaps you've been the speaker who kind of opens the talk like, these ways that I described at the beginning, and I'm like, that's the wrong way. But I hope this has been helpful. It's such a joy and an honor to journey with you. You have millions of choices when you podcast. Thanks for pressing play today. We'll see you next time.